Nice to see you. Okay, it is time. Here it is. Let me call this regular board meeting to order. It's our March 15th board meeting. The first item to be on our agenda is the welcome prayer and the pledge. I already did the welcome. Dr. Stiles will lead us in prayer, and then Mr. Sailors has an introduction for a gentleman who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Will we all stand, please? Dr. Stiles.
May we pray. Almighty and everlasting God, look upon us in your mercy, we pray. Thank you for bringing us here safely this evening and for giving us a measure of your grace. Although we come from diverse backgrounds and knowledge sets, we're here to serve our students, our Greenville County School family, and our communities. We thank you that we serve at the will of the people, and we continue to live in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Preserve our liberties and our freedoms, protect those who defend it, and unite us as a people of a blessed nation. Be with the people in Ukraine tonight as they suffer much injustice and face the risk of losing their freedoms. Grant wisdom to President Biden and the world leaders who desire to offer support. Direct their steps, guide their hearts and minds, and grant wisdom in words and actions. Comfort those who are suffering the loss of family and friends through death and separation, as well as those who have lost the comforts and pleasures of home. Under the shadow of your wing may they find rest and refuge for their souls. These things we plead in your holy name. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, this evening we are honored to have Samuel Lindsay from Taylor's Elementary School be with us this evening. Samuel is a fourth grader there. With him this evening are his parents, his mother Kim, who is a counselor at Berea High School, his dad Jeff, his sister Lindsay, his teacher Candace Pace. Candace, thank you for your service, and his principal Heather Dye. Heather, thank you for your leadership at Taylor's. Samuel is a fourth grader who embodies the Taylor's Elementary School principle and mission statement of empowering leaders for today and tomorrow. Samuel displays leadership every day in his hard work, both inside and outside the classroom. Samuel displayed some of his many talents in the school's recent talent show, exhibiting his skillful handling of a lightsaber. He has designed and 3D printed some incredible creations this year, including a dinosaur and a working seatbelt buckle for an automobile. Most recently, he shared his knowledge of nonstop motion animation by planning, creating, and teaching a professional development session to the teachers at Taylor's on this topic. Alongside his teacher, Samuel has guided the teaching of creating their own nonstop motion videos shared with ideas that can incorporate this technology in the teachers' classrooms. He has a love for engineering. Samuel says he also plans one day to be a NASA engineer. He is again with his family this evening. And Samuel, thank you very much for what you do at Taylor's. We're very proud of you. The microphone's yours.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. The next item on the agenda is the adoption of the consent calendar. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The motion carries. Next item on the agenda is appearance of visitors. We have 3 visitors tonight. Dr. Stiles, would you please read our rules of engagement?
Yes. As each speaker's name is called, he or she should proceed to the podium at the end of the board dais where there's a microphone and a light system. Each speaker has up to 3 minutes to speak to the board. The light system will be green for the first 2 minutes and will turn yellow when 1 minute remains on the speaker's allotted time. In keeping with board policy KCA, abusive language or personal attacks aimed at students or staff members will not be permitted. All speakers are expected to behave in an orderly and respectful manner. The board will not engage with discussion with the speaker or respond to any comments. The speaker will designate a member of the staff to respond to each speaker in an appropriate and timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. Our first speaker is Angelica Childs.
Good evening. My name is Angelica Childs, and I teach second grade at Summit Drive Elementary. I currently serve as one of the co-chairs of our Greenville County Schools Teacher Forum. The purpose of our Teacher Forum is to promote the improvement of education for the students of Greenville County Schools. And we do this by supporting and empowering educators in 3 main professional ways: through advocacy, leadership, and service. Teacher Forum's core membership is composed of each school's Teacher of the Year. Tonight, I am joined by many of my colleagues from Teacher Forum, and I wanted to introduce our group and share that we intend to increase our attendance at these school board meetings in hopes to build deeper relationships with our school's leadership and our school board. We would love to have you visit our classrooms, and we look forward to continued dialogue on how we can work together to serve our students. We know that it takes a village to do this work, and we are thankful to be on the same team as you are. Tonight, I wanted to specifically thank you for 2 recent actions that you took to support our school district. Thank you for the one-time bonus for non-teaching and teaching employees, as well as the increased expenditures classified under learning recovery, student supports and services, and direct instruction. We are grateful for your dedication to ensure excellence in our district. Your work to analyze our needs, create policies, and allocate resources to support us has been felt by all of the teachers in our district, and we thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Childs. Our next speaker is Laura Godfrey.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Laura Godfrey. I'm the current PTA president at Stone Academy. Because of this role, I also sit on the School Improvement Council for Stone Academy. At our last SIC meeting this month, we had the opportunity to hear from Ms. Leventis Wells regarding current initiatives on the school board and discussing ideas for the upcoming budget. During this discussion, it was brought to our attention that we desperately need more school counselors at the elementary level in Greenville County Schools. Our school counselor at Stone Academy, Brooke Howard, gave us some interesting statistics regarding student counselor ratios. The recommended ratio for American School Counselor Association is 250 to 1. The national average is 415 to 1. South Carolina's average is 336 to 1. At Stone Academy, Ms. Howard works by herself with a ratio of 552 to 1. Ms. Howard somehow manages to do all her required duties as the sole school counselor while also checking in on those students she knows need some love and care. I know this personally because she's been a wonderful support for my son, a 5th grader at Stone Academy. It is my understanding that Mr. Rob Rhodes, the Director of School Counseling Services at Greenville County Schools, has been working to try to achieve this ratio recommended by the American School Counsel Association, starting with high school counselors and working down through middle school and elementary school. We already know that COVID has taken a toll on our kids at all ages. While at our SIC meeting, we also discussed how important it is for young kids, our elementary school kids, to feel supported by their school counselor and comfortable going to the counselor should they need to talk to someone who cares, that's trained to handle all sorts of emotional challenges. If we can get our elementary school kids to their school counselor, we hope that later in life, they will be more willing to go to the counselor as a middle schooler or high schooler when their emotional needs and anxiety can be higher, heavier, and urgent. We need more counselors to ensure that all our kids have the opportunity to speak to someone when their anxiety becomes more than they can handle. Investing in more counselors also supports our teachers because they can focus on academics when their kids have their emotional support they need. I ask you to continue your mission to provide more school counselors for Greenville County elementary schools by funding more positions in this next fiscal year budget. I understand that we pay our counselors better than many mental health organizations, so I hope we can actively promote counseling positions in our amazing school district. Thank you for your time and consideration and for your service to Greenville County Schools.
Thank you, Ms. Godfrey. Next speaker is Sarah Merrell.
Hi, me again. I have collected some stuff from Greenville County teachers, and I just wanted to read this to you. One of your representatives has reminded us that your teachers are supposed to remain neutral when controversial topics arise. When that second grader that I brought up a few months ago brought up a SEL lesson that he can change into a girl if he feels like it, you silence the teacher from speaking truth by telling them they have to remain neutral. You caused the other kids in the classroom to hear a lie. You are accountable for that. Maybe remaining neutral isn't fair for all of the other conservative families in the classroom. You're allowing the kids to hear lies, and if the teacher isn't allowed to correct it, they may start believing this lie. Here's another problem that we have with your remaining neutral policy. You have liberal teachers pushing leftist ideology. At Wade Hampton High School, your media center page lists categories of books through the Destiny Discover app. One main book category through Destiny Discover on Wade Hampton High School's media center page is LGBTQ resources. It sounds like you're promoting a leftist agenda. Your Hillcrest Middle School, putting the book George on their website, is promoting an agenda. The book George is about a 4th grade transgender student. So why are you promoting this transgender ideology? That is not remaining neutral. Teachers putting pronouns after their names in their email signature is not remaining neutral. Teachers asking students which pronoun they want to be called each day is not remaining neutral. You, as the board, are supporting this liberal ideology if you do nothing about it. This creates confusion to all of the other students. This falls right in line with the critical race theory and the SEL lessons that we've been talking about that teach children to question their gender identity and sexual identity. Perhaps the school district should stick to the reading and the writing and the arithmetic. So I know multiple teachers that have worked for you for years, and none of them have ever seen this policy, the policy to remain neutral. Is there a print form of this policy? What happens when your policy is not being followed? Is that grounds for disciplinary action? It is up to us to seek legal action. Is it up to us to seek legal action against schools that are not following your policy? Where is this policy located, and do only some of your teachers have access to it? If there were one instance of LGBTQ promotion, then it could be handled within that specific school. As we look around, though, it seems to be found throughout the school district. Perhaps the school district shouldn't be involved in discussing student sexuality. They are children. If parents want to get involved in that subject, that is their right, but promoting LGBTQ issues should not be occurring in public school. I know you mentioned last month that you as a board will reevaluate the SEL portion of Rethink Ed. We very much appreciate you taking the time to thoroughly look into that and what is being pushed. Teachers need to be trained and equipped to be able to handle these topics. If not, put them onto the counselors and psychologists that need to be in schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Merrill. The next item on the agenda is 3.01, no, excuse me, is 4.01, Superintendents Report. Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Mr. Meek. In place of a formal superintendent's report tonight, because I think you may have some questions you want to present to me later on regarding some information about teacher pay raise and that sort of thing, I want to just take a moment to introduce publicly an appointment that occurred last week. Jeremy Carrick, who is the new principal at Carolina High School. Jeremy comes to us from leading and currently leading R.B. Stahl High School in Charleston County, and has been principal there since 2017. We are most pleased to have him join us in Greenville County, and I believe he's already been at the school for a day or so, and will be at the school tomorrow to begin the process of making that transition to new leadership. So we welcome Jeremy to Greenville County Schools and look forward to him carrying forward the good work at Carolina High School. Jeremy, welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Royster. Next item on our agenda is 5.01. The recommended motion coming from the Committee of the Whole does not need a second, is to approve the letter requesting action by the State Board of Education regarding adopted instructional materials for grade K through 5 science. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed to the motion say no. The motion carries. Next item on the agenda, 5.02. Recommended motion coming from the Advocacy Committee does not need a second, to approve the letter to the Greenville delegation regarding education funding. Mr. Lewis, do you have any comments?
Mr. Chairman, just to say that at the Committee of the Whole meeting last week, we received some information that I think Dr. Royster is prepared to speak in a little more detail about the difference between what was, I think, assumed to be a $4,000 pay increase for all teachers that was approved by the House Ways and Means Committee and what has turned into reality to be significantly less than that for Greenville County Schools. And so we have prepared a letter to send to our delegation, which is on board docs, but was also sent out to you previously, and this item was approved by the committee earlier today. I'll let Dr. Royster maybe speak a little bit to it, if that's right.
Be glad to do that, Mr. Lewis. You can pull that. I think it's good to show it, so particularly folks in the crowd, to be a little easier to follow it. I think won't go through the entire presentation again. It had been very widely reported throughout the state through various media outlets, and it was the understanding of a lot of people, teachers, school administrators, generally in the community. The state would provide a $4,000 pay raise for all teachers, but that's not an accurate picture. And we went through the details of that, talking about this establishment of a new formula, the basis on which that new formula was constructed. And without going into all the details of that, the proviso that puts forward this funding is very clear in that although this was reported widely as a $4,000 raise, the proviso clearly states that districts paying in excess of the state minimum may use its allocation at its discretion. All right, so number one, removing a mandate to provide a $4,000 raise. But more importantly, it doesn't fund a $4,000 raise. And we'll look at that in just a minute. So whatever people thought about it is not accurate, and I think you all did a good job of explaining that in your letter. I think we had a good discussion about that at the Committee of the Whole, and I think our local media did an excellent job of covering what was actually passed, at least from Ways and Means to the floor of the House. So we'll make clear it does not cover that. It rolls all these funds into this formula that's based on a theoretical 11.2 to 1 teacher-student ratio. And everybody knows that doesn't truly reflect how many students are in front of a teacher. And it lists there all those positions they count in that ratio. Those are the only ones for which you derive funding. Now, that means you'd need 67,223 teachers in the state. The next item shows you the amount needed to fund $4,000 plus fringe. Right now, in the year we're in, every dollar we increase a teacher's pay or an employee's pay cost us $1.32. 32 cents of which the employee never sees. Now, that's not the part that's deducted out of their check. They never see that at all. It's the 32 cents that goes towards our part, the employer's part of their fringe benefits. Basically for us, health care and the employer contribution to retirement. So statewide, $4,000, including fringe for 67,223 teachers, would cost $266,203,080. Now, the theory is that across the state, this would be a 75-25 split, and they have a formula that based on the local district's property wealth in the district, not how much you're being taxed yet, but the property wealth. Our share is actually 74-26. Our share, we'd get 74% from the state. But to go back to the statewide number, the new money actually allocated to public school funding for that proviso is $196,032,747. So if it was desired to enact a $4,000 per teacher raise for every teacher in the state of South Carolina, that money would be $70,170,333 short. That's the state share would be short. When you add the state's share that they're short on funding it for every teacher in the state to the district share, that is the 25%, plus that shortfall of the amount put out by the state, which is a little over $196 million, if there was an effort to fully fund $4,000 for every teacher in the state of South Carolina, regardless of what they currently make, it would cost districts $158,904,693 to truly do what people might have originally thought was being proposed. Now, again, that wasn't the proposal. As we understand it, the proposal was to bring the minimum districts up. We pay in Greenville County Schools for a beginning teacher more than $6,000 above the state minimum. I believe it's $6,500. Right, Robin? More, that's entry salary. Ours is $6,500 more. Our average is probably, it's well above the state average, but that's entry salary. So we are well above the state. The state's salary schedule stops at 23 steps. Our district salary schedule goes to 32 steps because for a number of years we have recommended and boards have supported, enthusiastically supported, increased teacher pay and being at the forefront of that in the state, because quality teachers have the most direct impact on quality student performance in the classroom, and the second greatest impact, quality principal in the building. And you all have always recognized that with the fact that we've recognized all employees with some sort of pay raise over time. $150 million short state level, right at 159. All right, Greenville County, let's bring it down to our level. Our share of the state funding formula is $19 million. So we would get $19 million more dollars in state funds than we get currently. If we gave all of our teachers, every teacher in the district, regardless of where they are on the salary schedule, $4,000. And the fringe for that, the total cost of that's $27 million. We'd be $8 million short if we just used the $19 million. If we provided a $4,000 pay raise and the fringe benefit cost and an annual step, so you moved up a step, you got the step plus $4,000 was added to that step because $4,000 was added to every step. That's $33 million, for which we'd be $14 million short. So you add all of that, $4,000 pay raise and fringe and annual step and proposed 18.1% increase, because we're being informed that there will be an increase to fringe benefit costs. We're at $37 million. Is that correct, Robin? 18 million short. If we were to do step for every teacher, $4,000 to every cell on the schedule, so you moved up a step, you got whatever that increase was, and they're of varying heights, from 0.5% to almost 4%. The state salary schedule steps are varying heights, and ours mirrors that, although we pay above it. So that's $18 million short when you consider the fringe that we have been informed about. Now that doesn't include, not included in the proviso, we grow. We're fortunate that we're a district of growth. We have an economically vital community, and we grow. We believe we're going to experience a larger growth than we have in several years for the coming year. We're working through those numbers right now. In a 5-year period, we average adding 40 FTEs, 40 positions every year for growth. Because as you all know, almost all of our positions, no matter what they are, teacher, assistant principal, counselor, support personnel in the schools, they're formula allocated. School grows, get more personnel. District grows, more personnel. We believe that number will likely exceed 40. We're not at the point in our budget preparation process yet to firmly speak to that. That's 40 at $81,700 per position. That's the average personnel cost, which includes the newly calculated fringe. So you can kind of figure what that is. Doesn't include a required step for teachers. We are required to give a step. We're not about what we'd like to do or what we desire to do or what might be best to do. The legislation that requires a step increase was not waived by this proviso. So we're still required to do that. Now you could determine that that's inside the 4,000 or outside it. That's why we showed the different scenarios. We have not addressed other employees. Every employee in this district is essential to the success of the district. Every employee in this district is key to the success of a teacher in the classroom in supporting those things that need to take place so they can teach and so that the buildings can operate. We haven't talked about any other operational cost increases. The latest report last week, the current rate of inflation is 7.5%. We spend, out of our more than $700 million budget, we only spend about $57 million on things. That's other than people, utilities, insurance, supplies, materials, whatever, about $57 million. Everything that we buy is going up in price. Everything we buy is affected by oil prices. Whether it contains a petroleum derivative or not, because it's shipped to us, oil prices affect it. So we haven't talked about any sort of adjustment to inflation for cleaning supplies, for supplies and equipment used in schools. We haven't discussed anything like that. The idea that there's a lot of money out there is not. We're one of the leanest operations in the state as far as a school. You know, our district administrative overhead is the lowest in the state of South Carolina, and it's less than a penny of every dollar. Yes, there are huge amounts of ESSER federal funds, but you can't use them for pay raises for employees that have to be sustained year after year after year after year. You all will recall, to avoid having to consider a tax increase last year, we recommended and the board voted to include the use of $20 million from our fund balance to carry forward in our budget this year. That puts you relying on non-recurring funds for recurring costs, because just about everything in that budget is recurring. Over time, we need to end our dependence on that, because our rating agencies that issue the ratings for our bonds will view that negatively if we don't ease off our dependence on it. It's fine to use it. It's fine to have it as a planned use, but they expect there to be a planned end to the dependence on it. So all of those considerations have to go into, there's $19 million in new state revenue. We are too early in the process to yet know. We get Tier 3 state funding to reimburse the loss of owner-occupied homes in the local taxes. You know, those of us who, if you live in your house that you and the bank own, you pay no taxes for operating purposes to the school district, 0. If you look at your tax bill the next time it comes, it'll have an amount out there for that purpose, and down at the very bottom, it'll give you a credit back for that. You pay 0. You pay for debt service for bonds, for district buildings, capital improvements. But you don't pay anything from your home for operating purposes. So there is a reimbursement that comes from the state. It does not equal what that would have generated had you still paid that tax, but it is some relief for that purpose. It goes up some each year. We don't yet have that number finalized. This is a year of reassessment in the county. Every 5 years, every county in the state is required to reassess property. County government may roll that forward they may defer that for a year. Our county chose to defer that. This is a year of reassessment. And a year of reassessment by statute, the millage is to be rolled back to ensure that there is no windfall. So in the 5 years leading up to reassessment, you get growth, you get additional revenue because the value of the property that was taxed goes up. You realize a little bit of increase every year. In a reassessment year, the millage is rolled back by the auditor so that you do not realize that. Now, we will realize some, but where we might generally get that much, it'll likely be this much. And we do not yet have the final tax report, revenue report from the county that covers the peak collection months, which will be December, January, February. It trails off after that. As you will recall, when we do the budget, we bring you a number sometimes toward the very end of the process because it is the latest number. So a little bit of revenue increase from Tier 3, a little bit of revenue increase, but not what we're accustomed to seeing from local property tax, and that $19 million to do all that we would need to do to continue, number one, to continue to operate like we currently do. In other words, if we staff at the same level we've been staffing. Secondly, to provide any raises for any employee. So that I think is, as a reminder of what we went through the other day, I think that sets the stage for where we are and hopefully provides the background information that's important to have as people look through this letter, as members of our delegation receive this letter. And then I think you all make some very clear and specific asks in that letter, and one of which being that we've mentioned as well to you all is help in this tremendous increase to fringe benefit cost on the employer side. I think that translates to putting it up about, is it 40 more cents? Robin, how many penny? Because right now we're at $1.32 for every dollar. It puts it to $1.43. So moving forward, every dollar of pay is $1.43. The 43 cents that no employee sees. They see the benefit of it, but they don't see that reflected in their check. And so would that cover what you would like for us to cover, Mr. Lewis?
No, that was great, Dr. Royster. Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, just as a reminder, the committee has brought forward a letter which was on board docs. There was only one slight revision, which was a grammatical error, and then it is the document that was there earlier this past week. It essentially asks the General Assembly to do 4 things. One is to fully fund the $4,000 raises for all teachers across the state rather than at a proportionate rate. 2 is that it asks that it adjust the 18% increase in employer contributions to health insurance to not pass that cost on to districts. Number 3 is to ask that the General Assembly adjust the allocation to the state, to school districts, based on inflation rates. And then 4th is what I think has been missing from all this that happened in 2019, is there was not really an incredible amount of consultation done between school districts and the House Ways and Means Committee when this was approved. And so it just has a recommendation that perhaps the House Ways and Means and Senate Finance could consult with local school districts before passing on these kind of things in the future. It's our hope that the timing of this letter could get to the Senate Finance Committee through our delegation and to the Senate Education Committee before their budget has been approved. And so while the House Ways and Means has moved their budget out to the floor, the Senate has not yet. And so that's kind of our goals here, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Ms. Leventis Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Royster, in 2019, Frank Rainwater met with a group of superintendents and finance directors to get a better understanding of what is involved in running a district of all sizes, because he brought in superintendents from districts of all across the state of South Carolina. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, ma'am. And he was charged by the General Assembly to develop a more simplified, streamlined state funding for education. And as a part of that process, he actually held multiple meetings with a group of superintendents and separately with a group of district finance directors that represented a cross-section of districts from throughout the state. So small, medium, large, rural, suburban. There are only really 2 of us that are rural, urban, and suburban. That would, well, 3 of us that are that way, but a representative group. And groups from districts that would be considered to have community wealth and a lack of community wealth. So a cross-section. He sought input, and he at least reached a draft version of a comprehensive funding plan that addressed all aspects of operating a system or a system of schools.
Which
you gotta have
right.
insurance and utilities and custodians and
Bus drivers.
right. It's not just teachers that operate a school, obviously.
Everyone that brings something to the table in the operational and the benefit and educating our students, everyone that's involved, whether it's from custodio, food services, administrators, principals, assistant principals, counselors, aides, and the list goes on, correct?
Yes.
So when you saw this $4,000 pay raise for all teachers, I'm sure your thought process, as well as all of ours, was this would include everything necessary to fund our teachers.
Yeah, the only experience that we've had in recent years with an across-the-board flat dollar amount was in, Robin, 2019, FY20, so it would have been, we were doing the budget in 19 for FY20. And the state put in place a $3,000 across-the-board raise for all teachers. And the state funded the $3,000 as a straight, flat rate based on every teacher in every district. Every district reports employment through the state's PCS system. So they went in that PCS system, a position code system, and every teacher you had in there, you got $3,000 for them. Through EIA, teacher pay raise, teacher pay supplement, they provided 100% of the fringe benefit cost for the $3,000. So the only experience in any recent year, and I'm thinking late 20 or more, maybe ever, of a flat raise was that experience where it was 100% paid for. So I think most people at the school district level, when they saw reported a $4,000 raise, when the only experience anybody had ever had with that was one other time, and here's how it was done. I think the conclusion to which we might have jumped was, well, it would be like they did it in FY20.
When they had everyone's input, and these would be reoccurring funds.
Well, they did solicit input, and part of the input was to do a flat raise because it raised everybody's salary in the state, and it raised everybody at every cell, and it raised, no matter where your steps end, it raised your pay because you're on a step no matter where they end. So if there's a teacher sitting out there that's on 35 and we don't have 35, they're on a step. So it would have raised that step as well. So literally every teacher got that $3,000.
So basically the $4,000 for all teacher raises. The small caveat that was in small print basically said, but if you're already at this scale, you can use that money for whatever you want.
In general terms, yes, ma'am.
Which meant it wasn't a $4,000 pay raise for all of our teachers throughout the state of South Carolina.
That's correct.
And because it's not, and this is an election year, I'm not sure some of the people on the committee understood what they were voting for. I'm hoping that our legislators and senators did not really understand because they didn't have Frank Rainwater up there telling them, you're making a big mistake. And I think they realized on one day that this isn't what they thought, but then because they had already passed it, they were going to stick to it. And hopefully this letter that we implemented at the advocacy committee pretty much says, look, you've got to do this, because what is it going to cost when we implement a teacher raise, benefits and so forth across the board for all of our employees in our district? I just don't feel like we can leave anyone out of this equation, but I also don't want to increase a 16 millage increase in order to pay for this. There's no way we could ask small businesses who are struggling as it is to go to the heights of a millage increase that would be extreme in order to meet the needs of our district, our teachers, and everyone who works here, to feel like we care. I mean, when this first came out, I received many phone calls from teachers saying, Linda, why did you vote against us getting a teacher raise, a $4,000 teacher? I said, I did not vote against that. I said I wanted our teachers to get raises, but our community cannot afford an extreme millage increase to finance the things that we need done to make it happen. I mean, this is a difficult time. It's very stressful. It's stressful for everyone. And then to put this on the front page of the paper, $4,000 raise, we're being penalized. Greenville is being penalized because we have gotten salaries above the $40,000 line. We're at 42,500 or whatever it is. We're penalized for doing great things for our district. And why can we not do more? Why can we not use that money? Why can they not fund it properly for everyone? Can you answer that, Dr. Royster? Because I am at my wit's end on this.
Which one of those?
I'm sorry. It's very annoying.
I don't believe some of those I can answer.
Yeah, it's just very annoying that we want things to look good and they're not good. If you say you're going to do it. Don't sit there and put these sound bites out there and say, go for it. So I'm just glad we got together with the advocacy today, Mr. Lewis, and that we voted on this to bring it to the board and that we're moving forward. I don't know where we're moving. It's going to be left in the hands of Columbia once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leventis Wells. Mr. Sailors.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Royster, just to clarify one thing, following up on Mrs. Leventis Wells' comment, can you share with everyone in the room who Frank Rainwater is?
Yeah, Frank is the head of the Department of Administration and Revenue for the state of South Carolina. And really, to clarify, it wouldn't have been his place to direct their action. He works at their direction. So when he was doing his work 2 or 3 years ago, when he involved districts, he was working at the direction of the General Assembly to come up with this streamlined state funding plan.
Correct.
His role in this was simply to do the numbers based on the overall amount that he was given, which he did. And he's the one that brought clarity to it to us. He presented it to us when it came out of Ways and Means before it ended up on the House floor. And it is now on the House floor, and they have not yet voted on it.
And is it correct to say that the work that he or his office did over the last couple of years to give the General Assembly the streamlined program that they asked for, would it be safe to say that when the General Assembly received that information, in this particular instance, they chose to use only a small portion of that report, thus the confusion in all of this topic?
The only part I would be unclear on, and Robin may know the answer to this, I don't know that he had the opportunity yet to present his final report to the General Assembly. Did he do that, Robin?
COVID came along, and that's when the original funding plan was halted or put on the shelf. And then this session, they brought just a portion back out.
And this is a portion of what he did, but it's only a portion of it.
Okay, and then we've been very proud of the fact that Greenville was the first district in the state to take starting teacher pay above $40,000.
Yes, sir.
And there's 29 districts in this state that have now met that mark at some level, roughly.
There are a few districts that have. We are right now #1 in the state in teacher pay.
Okay. The balance, according to the new messaging after the caucus meeting on Tuesday, they're saying now, well, this was actually an opportunity to give smaller districts with a smaller tax base an opportunity to bring theirs up to the 40,000, thus the flexibility. My question is, do you really think there's enough money split 73 ways for smaller districts to do just that?
I think that's questionable. Okay. I've not seen one of the particular districts you're talking about. I have not seen their calculation. The people that I've talked with, which are more the larger districts and our neighbors who would not be at that impoverished level, many of them are concerned that the amount they're receiving would not even be enough to pay a step increase and the associated fringe cost.
Okay. Since you brought up the associated fringe cost, they're recommending or requiring an 18% contribution, correct?
Yes, sir. It's a 18 and a little bit of change, 18% and a little bit of change increase. Yes, sir.
And what's the current rate at now?
We're at 32 cents on the dollar, and we'll move to
Approximately 42 cents.
So from 32% to 42%.
And fringe includes, as you stated earlier, healthcare and the retirement program.
Yes, sir. The employer contribution of those
Correct.
things. Yes, sir.
Is this, and Julie, you may have to chime in on this one. Do we believe that there is a reason that are they putting all of that obligation on our back because they have yet to address the retirement system's shortfalls?
I believe that this is the final increase in the increase that was passed, what was that, 5 years ago, Robin, or is there one more left?
I think there's one more because we paused during COVID.
They suspended the requirement for a year.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, we're used to getting maybe one unfunded mandate, and now we're getting, what, 3?
I think the first one would be, it's only unfunded if you believe, if they'd made it clear it's $4,000.
Well, if you listen to the tape of the committee meeting, they said $4,000.
They said $4,000 to each cell on the salary schedule.
And
That's what
that
they
came from
said.
the chairman of the committee.
And what they have since clarified to us that meant was to those at the minimum level. But I think it's clear to see how people didn't get that meaning from what you said
Okay.
and what they said.
And then one final question, that is somewhat unrelated to this. We have also talked about making sure that our bus drivers are adequately paid. There is a provision for them, but it is not included in this particular proviso.
It is a separate revenue stream, and there was a small increase to driver pay. Their current driver pay to us is what is it, Robin?
I'm not sure that figure.
It's less than half of what we actually pay for a driver.
Yes.
Okay. But when we're coming back to the teacher salary and the teacher scale, that is in proviso.
Yes, sir.
And our civics lesson for tonight is that's a one-year temporary addition. It is not recurring funding.
That is correct.
So we could be sitting here this time next year having as bad or worse a conversation unless the General Assembly corrects that and makes this a permanent recurring line item. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sailors. Ms. Doolin.
That was one of my questions also, since this is a proviso. This is only good for one fiscal year?
That's correct.
And so we would be responsible, I think, can you go back to the other figure? We would be responsible for the 37 million for recurring years? Or 18 million minimum? Is that what it was?
Well, whatever this body decides to pay a teacher, you are in the future required to maintain that level above the state minimum, unless you go through you follow some RIF policy which would allow you to furlough people for days. But once you establish a teacher salary, then you have that ongoing obligation for that salary.
So if we went all in, we'd be 18 million short this year and 37 million short each additional year, if the proviso was only for 1 year. Is that correct?
Yeah, if we didn't get the 19
million for recurring years.
If you didn't get the 19 million, you would be 18 million short, and then in subsequent years, the total 37.
37 million, the additional years. Just for my recollection, when we did $1,000 bonuses for every employee, was that total around 12 million?
Something like that, but bonuses do not have associated fringe cost.
So even at $1,000 bonus, $1,000 raise for every employee, because I don't think any of my colleagues would vote for only teachers to get a raise and not everyone. Even for $1,000 raise plus fringe, I don't even know if 19 million would cover all of that.
Well, I can give you an example of what 19 million will almost cover.
Okay.
The very last line. And though you all have been familiar with seeing this before, if you've been on the board a while, because we try to do something comparable for all employees. If we raised every employee's pay 2%, so if you got a step and that step wasn't equal to 2%, you got whatever it took to make it equal to 2%. If you weren't on a step as a teacher, you got 2%. If you're on a step that's more than 2%, you got whatever that was. So if it was 2.5, 3.2, 3.8, whatever it was. And every other employee in the district got 2%. Everybody else, bus driver, principal, clerk, custodian, carpenter, everybody else. The total cost for that, salary and fringe, is $20.7 million. And at the end of the day, you could say every employee in this district received a 2% raise. And that's just above the 19 million that we got. Now again, that doesn't take into account those two strands of revenue we've not yet calculated, nor does it take into account adding somewhere in excess of 40 FTEs, nor does it take into account any adjustment for inflation. So that kind of gives you a ballpark idea.
So if this legislation proviso passes, and we don't want to raise taxes on our neighbors, probably the most that the district could afford is a 2% raise for everyone.
If you didn't want to raise taxes, it might be somewhere between 1% and 2%. Because remember, you got to think about that. Somewhere between 40 and 60 FTEs. We just don't know yet. We're still working through those numbers for population projections, school enrollment projections for next year. And there are certain things we have to procure that there's going to be a cost increase to. So somewhere north of 1, but it might not rise to 2 if you choose to do no tax increase. And remember, you also still need to be showing an effort to reducing reliance on fund balance in your general fund. And that reliance is $20 million. Percentage-wise, that's not a huge percent of our budget, but you need to be showing some decrease to that over time.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions, comments? Ms. Goodwin Caldwell, you have the floor.
I have a question. It was a comment that was made that the governor made about all of the money that we receive here in Greenville County. Isn't most of the money that we receive, like the ESSA funds and all of that, they are tied to certain things? So it doesn't matter how much money we receive here in Greenville County, it's usually tied to something else. It couldn't go toward this.
The only way you can spend ESSER money on salary of any kind is it has to be directly tied to an ESSER-related expense. For example, we've hired 60-something interventionists to work with students to make up for what they might have missed. We can pay 100% of their salary. But when the ESSER money ends, that salary goes away. Now, we've been very purposeful in not hiring more positions than we could absorb in a given school year because we grow and we have people who leave us. So we know we can absorb them. But you can't use ESSER money to pay parts of people's salary unless it's directly related to ESSER. And for those people, you have to log what they're doing that's directly related to ESSER to pay that portion of their salary. For example, we paid people to provide schools with help with doing all that tracking and tracing we had to do. They worked after hours, they got paid extra, it was directly related, and we accounted for it directly related to that. So can't use ESSER for that. We already talked about the other source of revenue that we have that's not recurring, and that's fund balance. You can use it to plug your budget when you need to do so. We did that to the tune of $20 million last year. That's not something you need to do over time. It's viewed as an extremely poor financial practice. If you do it without planning to do it, and you do it without having a planned reduction on its dependence, the bond rating agencies will downrate our bonds. We have the highest bond rating a school district can receive in the state of South Carolina. What that means for taxpayers is when we go to sell bonds, we pay less for them. So it costs taxpayers less to borrow money to pay for capital projects, i.e. the facilities that we have.
So it looks like our people in Columbia need an education lesson on how to do finance then, huh?
Might be
I'll
helpful.
take that into consideration, Columbia. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goodwin Caldwell. Anyone else? Hearing none, The motion on the floor is to approve the letter to the Greenville delegation regarding education funding. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed to the motion say nay. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is approval of the annual personnel contract recommendations. The recommended motion from the administration is to approve the annual personnel contract recommendations as presented. I need a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second from Ms. Bush. Any discussion? Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motions on the floor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is approval of the 2020 redistricting map. Mr. Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a follow-up to the committee of the whole last week. And so after Tuesday of last week, I worked diligently with the Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office to create a third version for you based upon your comments at the committee of the whole. So this third version is on board docs. It's also, Ms. Fitzer is showing it to you right now. It's the one that's in the front right there. And that is titled Map C. Just for clarification, the terminology now has sort of shifted to make sure everybody's on the same page. As version 1 is Map A, version 2 is Map B, and version 3 is Map C. So just make sure everybody's clear on that. So all of the comments and requested changes have been implemented in this newest version, Map C. In addition to what was said on Tuesday, I did hear from Ms. Wells and Mr. Lewis and requesting a slight change to their border boundaries. One sort of affected near Southside Park there and also near Hillcrest Middle. Slight tweaks to their lines, and they were both in agreement and only affected their respective districts. And so that is a version you have before you. This version, very similar to the prior two versions, still keeps two districts, District 23, 24, as majority minority school areas. I'm sorry, 23 and 25, I apologize. And the deviation regarding the population within each area still meets the legal standard, well below 10%. It is at 6.90 as the deviation. And so still meets all the parameters of the Voting Rights Act, as I discussed last week, but it incorporates all the changes that we discussed last Tuesday. So that's now before you for discussion.
Thank you. Mr. Suddeth.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve Map 3 or Map C to send to the South Carolina Legislature for final approval.
Second. I have a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion? Hearing any discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda would be 6.01 Committee Liaison Reports. We have heard from the Advocacy Committee, but do you have anything else, Mr. Lewis?
We always have more, Mr. Meek. So there are a couple of things that are still pending within the General Assembly that we are still paying attention to. As a reminder, April the 7th is the crossover deadline, so essentially bills need to make it either pass the House or the Senate to cross over to the other body to pass this year. And so there are a few of those that we are still paying attention to: the voucher bill, education savings accounts bill, some bills around critical race theory, and then some questions around tax rebates, which could actually affect small businesses in Greenville County, are all bills that we're watching. I did want to provide an additional update. One of our earlier resolutions this year was on mental health services. And we asked the governor's office and the Department of Mental Health to look at mental health services available in schools. The Joint Citizen Legislative Committee on Children is currently taking that up, and they're looking at several recommendations that actually came from us to them. One of them is a recommendation to fully fund a school counselor to student ratio of 1 to 250 for the state of South Carolina. The idea would be that if we could get that school counselor to student ratio to 250, that it could free up the work that mental health counselors are doing in the schools that aren't billable, which would allow us to then increase the number of billable hours that a mental health counselor could deliver, which would possibly increase their pay, which is the other recommendation coming out of that committee. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but I just wanted to provide an update that as a result of the earlier letter that we sent, there is still more discussions happening than there were before.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Any other reports? Hearing none. Next item on the agenda, 7.01 monthly finance report. Dr. Royster.
Ms. Stacker, I don't think you have anything of particular note to bring to their attention, but Ms. Stacker, I'll be glad to try to answer any questions you might have.
Do I have any questions? Mr. Suddeth.
Dr. Royster, in looking at the miscellaneous equipment expenditure report, we're ordering teacher computers. Does every teacher have a computer that the district purchases?
Yes, sir.
How long do they usually keep a computer before it's replaced?
I think the refresh cycle is 3 years now, isn't that right? 3?
All right. And one other question. On the fencing that we've got for these two schools, is that replacement or is that additional?
On the what, Mr. Sutherland?
Two fencing at Bethel and at Welcome.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of what you said.
At the minor improvements expenditure report,
Yes, sir.
we've got two schools on there that we've got fencing for. Bethel Elementary.
Fencing?
Fencing, F-E-N-C-I-N-G.
It would be new fencing if it's in minor improvements. If it were replacing fencing, it would be in maintenance.
What is our rule for fencing at a school?
We fence playgrounds, we fence athletic facilities, and we fence mechanical equipment, and we fence where we might have a security issue. We may fence parking areas at some locations that house activity buses. In general, that would be our fencing. We don't generally fence entire school properties.
Do we fence part of the school property?
Yes, sir, in those circumstances I mentioned, or if we believe it presents some unique security concern.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Suddeth. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I need a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.